Namaste, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom, Mir, Niha, Buenos Dias, Buenas tardes, welcome in, what up though? This is a continuation of something I shared earlier today. Ha ha ha. My interest is doing it today before the conclusion of the day whilst there's still daylight. And so that means expediently, and it is technically freezing out here. 0, probably less than 0. It's gonna be, what is it, a cold summer? Is that what it is? Anyways, just saw a clip of, actually the half of a clip of a Métis dancing event arriving soon, and it having a distinct style, but that brings together native as well as Scottish, Irish, Celtic, Anglo stylings of dance. I'm reminded of river dancing in the footwork, and at first I have that reaction to seeing river dancing, which is beautiful, but at the same time it's challenging. But that's basically my point, because it occurs to me that when people talk about cultural appropriation, that's not a positive thing, obviously. But to be honest, what the further concern is cultural imposition. It seems as though if we, and again, I'm just responding to something I saw a few seconds ago, and I share this accordingly, for potential perpetuity. It seems as though when there is due mitigation of undue cultural appropriation, I'll do that one, due mitigation of undue cultural imposition, then the experience of cultural appropriation seems less, period, full stop. Here we go. So in the joint I did before, I mentioned, I addressed the topics of, this is earlier today, the weekly consideration, which is corruption and commitment, how life is directed in either of these two directions. And so it's through the commitment of ourselves to something of a greater purpose that we lessen the experience of corruption. Our experience, our proximity, and additionally. So that's the beginning joints. I endeavor to get to describe like the notion of the game of love. Kings and queens, I get caught up in that metaphor and the court. So that, and that's what took a lot of the time of just like negotiating with that. Then I address like the notion of orthodox, mixed race, and mélanger. I still have yet to. Actually, I did do a recording on the concepts of mixed race, but I've yet to talk about orthodox mixed race. But I explained some of that in the joint previously. So this is part 2, numero dos, part dos. And so I mentioned that the next topic is why I play myself. I'm uncertain how the audio goes. I'm recording this on IG Live, but I'm also sharing this on IG Live, but I'm also doing this as another recording. So that's with the headphones on, but the headphones are not connected to the phone with IG Live. So, anyways, why I play myself? What I put myself out there. But actually, before I do that, I'm gonna like go back to the notion of. And I'm actually going to try to keep this within like 20 minutes, half an hour. And if I that's what I'm going to say. I have little expectation of that being the case if things are unobstructed. But anyways, light's going to play a factor soon as well. I also say hi to people who walk by, so I just provide that as a FYI. I'm going to return to the notion of commitment, and particularly as applies to the metaphor that I share and the description I provide regarding the game of love. and further into that notion of influence, manipulation, and additionally, in that respect, I'll provide the consideration of commitment being turned into cash. When we look at like social media influencers, there's the consideration of the people who commit to those social influencers, because that's the value that the influencers have towards the marketers, and additionally, who's like paying attention. Commitment may not be full commitment, but still commitment in the forms of subscriptions and this, that, and the other. And so people see that and say, "Oh, that person has influence. People are committing to that person. We can do something with that." And so in this scenario, when there's evidence of a person having influence, that influence is transferable to marketers who are connected with industrialists who have large machinery that churns up the trees. So that's a very extremely fast synopsis of like part of the system and how it works. But so it's not a matter of like the influencers directly doing the things that are detrimental or adverse to the people who are doing the commitment, the audience in this respect, and it's other than the marketers, because the marketers are just sharing some videos or whatever, showing a commercial, and then the industrialists. Then we get closer to where the harm is, because the industrialists are the ones who have the machinery within the global geopolitical economic sphere, have the distribution networks, methodologies of production, extraction, and additionally, and so with that infrastructure are able to make money, and wield this, that, and the other, but still need to have influence. And so they go to the marketers. The marketers identify who's the cool people, who has the attention of the young people, who actually still pay attention to things, and then there it is. So the industrialists, and so what's the harm? The industrialists, and this is not anything against categorically industrialists, this is just the nature of things. The industrialists, in one way or another, are I'll just refer to it again, what I say, churning up the trees. Literally, the trees are being cut down, and we all glean from that. But there's harm that's being done with that. And then if we look at ourselves as trees, industrialists are churning us up as well. That's a little bit further of a political commentary, but there's harm in that. And the harm is distributed amongst those who are increasingly vulnerable. I'm getting messages from the phone now. So that's the cycle of life. We can include or emphasize in this particular observation of the cycle betrayal, usury, and other things. And my thing is not to be all negative or whatever, but it's just to be mindful, so that we recognize that things that just seem innocuous or whatever, harmless fun, is less harmless than one thinks. Even just getting attention, and additionally causing distractions, there can be challenges with that. So again, being mindful of how we invest ourselves, and the purpose of the things that we do, and the commitments that we forward. So now we get to, why do I play myself? If it's so important of how we commit ourselves, how we make ourselves vulnerable and everything else. Why, if you see what I done put on the internet, on the interweb, and this is not like, there are cars that go by, there's a brick road here, so it's comparatively loud. It's actually a comparatively quiet neighborhood, but when cars go by, for some reason, cars like to go by fast on this street, and it's brick. So, anyways, it's loud. Why am I playing myself? Why am I putting myself out there? I was about to say something, but off my notes, but I mean, that's not on my notes, but I'll let it go for the moment. Sometimes that's like, oh yeah, I was saying I'm not trying to be like, I'm not trying to boast, and I'm not trying to do that kind of like anti-boasting of I'm not this and I'm not that. So or like deprecating boasting, if that's a thing. Anyways, um, what I'll say to begin, why I'm perceived as playing myself, but why I put myself out there particularly, and I admit to that, or I own that. Playing myself is something else, and I very much understand why people say that. But it's just a matter of having not all the information and not seeing everything about it and making that conclusion with insufficient information. So first I'll say this: there's a purpose for everything. Everything, whether we understand it or otherwise. There's a very meaningful, spiritual, existential, sacred purpose for everything that is done. Everything that we think is stupid, silly, heinous, atrocities, and additionally. So that's first thing. Second thing is, I am not predatory. I am not a predator. I am not human. I say that literally. I'm not human. I'm not better than or worse than, but I'm just not human. And I say that because I'm specifically, one of the reasons, the primary reasons why I'm not human is because I'm not predatory, and humans are predatory. I'm looking at sparrows eating seeds, I guess, or I guess that's seeds, maybe it's falafel. But the different animals, we categorize animals as predatory or prey. I'm not prey either. Anything can be prey. Everything is prey. So there's that. Did I just contradict myself? You know what I'm talking about. In that binary of predator and prey, I'm not prey. Are we there? All right. So I'm not a predator either. I'm one of them there. Omnivore, not omnivore either. I'm one of those pachyderms where I don't chew up others. I do my best to abstain from that. Yet I don't run away from the predators when they come about. So, and there's nothing wrong with cats who do that. Cats who run from the cats. But me not one of them folk. So, but that's not the point either. It's just I'm not a predator. It's not killing others. It's not enslaving others. It's not indebting others, and it's avoiding that as much as possible. And so, because of that, when I do the things that I do, there's a significantly different reason. Right? There's a significantly different reason why I do it than when many people do it, and that's not for everything, because most of the things we do are pretty much not predatory, to be honest. But there are certain things that we do collectively as beings that are predatory, and it's those things that, for example, if you see a zebra walking up to you, most likely the zebra is without the intention of coming up and devouring you. Or I have to be careful these second person joints. But that's, so what's the purpose of the zebra? The zebra, like maybe walking slow or whatever else, the zebra walking up slow to a person sitting in the Serengeti is most likely not to kill and eat the person. It may be like to check and see what the person's on. It might be to get some food or whatever else. Now, if a hyena is coming up, walking up, sniffing, and coming up, creeping, there may be that intentionality. It's different reasons. It's the same activity. It's still just walking up, maybe slow or whatever else. But because one is a predator and one is not, we make different conclusions regarding the intentionality, and thus the precautions, and additionally accordingly. So that's why I say that. So when it comes to social interactions, when it comes to communications, a lot of people, that's like a huge part of just human experience, is just communication, and also like then translating, deciphering, decoding, breaking down, breaking up, whatever. Well, breaking down, building up, and additionally. And so when I say things and when I communicate things, it may seem like if people translate that into what people expect, into people's general expectations about what people generally do and what people generally intend to do, particularly dudes, like stuff could look very shady, suspect, like pathetic. Oh, this cat has no self-respect. I've been accused of, and additionally, but those conclusions are based upon predatory intentionalities, the presumption of those predatory intentionalities, and I'm not saying I'm better than that, and it could be perceived as some just highly, greatly inflated ego, some psychotic, schizophrenic notion of grandeur and superiority. That insanity is in the eye of the beholder. But I'm communicating that as much as I can be. I'm not predatory. So, and this particularly pertains to the communication that I make towards women or with women. It may be perceived as, if we take that in the general context of behavior, intentionalities, and expectations. Men just using women, sexually exploiting women, and using all different type of schemes and games and everything else to do that. Even like the legit religious game, or the legit commitment game, or the legit reform game, or I've learned my lesson, or this, that, and the other. Guys, it's ancient. Dudes got them all. And dudes are nice with it, and can be nice with it for a long, long time. So I recognize that. And I mean, there's an absence of anything that I say that can't be done as game. So ultimately, it's in our acts, it's in our walk, and the evidence of that. And it's difficult to evidence that thoroughly, categorically, just by online. Now, one can see how long cat's been on there and what cat's been doing, this, that, and the other, and that might sort of have evidence and get some anecdotes and testimonies or whatever else. But anyways, that's my point. So why put myself out there? Why put out my business, first I don't put a lot of my business. I say about things I've done in general terms. Sometimes I'm specific on specific topics, and so that this is a different topic, because I don't put my business when it comes. I am searching for a wife, and so there is that awkwardness and vulnerability. And to be honest, I have comparatively modest experience in that realm of relationships with women, and particularly in pursuing such arrangement in a traditional way. So it's awkward, and there are few people that I can consult with. There are people that I do consult with, but there are few people that I can categorically consult with, because the tradition I practice comes from a number of different traditions. So, and each tradition, to be able to avail myself to the refuge and the sanctity of a religious leader and say, tell me what to do, help me out. They're like, okay, sure, but you're going to have to be part of our crew. And because I'm comparatively independent, I can consult with brethren with whom I have established rapport and relationship and mutual respect. But simultaneously, what up? Simultaneously, I'm precluded from leaning too much on any one of these brethren, so and kinfolk. So that means I got to figure things on my own and do the best I can and be as genuine as I can in that respect. So yeah, I ain't perfect, I'm clumsy, this and the other, and I learned in the process, and I done learned a lot in recent years, particularly when I step up my own discipline, and I become increasingly thorough in my walk in life, and because in that my purpose is increasingly genuine, and so when I make, it's increasingly genuine. If I do anything that's inaccurate or clumsy, it's less a matter of some BS that I'm doing. I'm still full of BS, but it's less a factor of that, and increasingly just a matter of ignorance. And again, it's two-way street. The women that I approach ain't perfect either, and I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but again, that's the nature. So, anyways, I learned. Now, that's one thing, and I'm open about it, and that's the other thing too. I have zero game. I don't have like smooth talk or whatever else. Any charisma or any like articulation that I have, it's for a greater purpose than myself, and it comes from an experience of honesty, and it's directed towards an experience of honesty. So I don't know if this may be considered a smooth talking or charisma or whatever else, but anything that I have in that respect, I'm literally precluded from like applying that in a selfish way. So I can be charismatic, but and even with like attractive women and additionally, but afterwards I can't be like, okay, so give me a number. No, I can't do that. I can't do that, period. But I can't even utilize my charisma for that purpose, and particularly intentionally. So when I do have the intention of approaching a woman, I'm very mindful and very purposeful, and also that is very different and actually in many ways is perceived as cringe and like thirsty or whatever else, amongst the norm of the single scene, particularly amongst people who are over early 20s, mid 20s, and so people are used to the game, and people are used to the other side being smooth and together and this, that, and the other. But to be honest, like if we're gonna be 100 about that, here's the thing about that joint. If a dude is smooth and he's laid back, he's not thirsty, he's like whatever, he's indifferent, he can take it or leave it, whatever. The actuality is he's having sex with other women. So if a woman sees him and thinks like, oh, he's confident, this, that, and the other, he's having sex with other women. That's why he's not pressed, and he's playing the game. And so if a woman is expecting some type of fidelity from him, and trust and stability and loyalty and all that other stuff and longevity, there may be a surprise in that scenario, and it's not just like overnight or severe, but that's the actuality. And then same thing for women. If she seems bright, and this, that, and the other, she's involved with a dude in some way or another. And all right, I have to be mindful of this because I don't mean any disrespect. So I'll say this. Go back to the dude. To the dude who's thirsty or appears as thirsty. It's most likely because he's not having sex, that he's saving himself, holding back. Not always, because there are a lot of dudes who, well, I'm getting a little. This wasn't my intentionality. I don't have these in my notes, so I have to be mindful of this, of my riffing at the moment, because there's a lot of reasons why guys are thirsty, and many of those reasons are not like virtuous. So I have to be mindful of that, and that brings in that's a whole nother different topic. So I don't want to. Add too much for the moment. So, all right. I will address the woman aspect of this as well, to be balanced and fair and honest. And my intention is to address this further in here. So a little bit, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I don't know. Actually, yeah, 20. All right. Yeah. Hey. Concentration. Women seeming to be confident. This is a broad categorization, and I have to be mindful of making these categorizations because it's beneficial to know that oftentimes the basic point is to know that the appearance can often be different than the actuality, and to be mindful of that. So I'm just going to leave it at that for the moment. I can address the details of what I was referencing somewhat, perhaps at another point, God willing. But for the moment, that's not the purpose, the main point of what I'm sharing at the moment. I'm talking about why I play myself, or why I'm perceived as playing myself and putting myself out there. So I described some of like the rationale of my communication towards women in the past, even that which is publicly visible. Now the other thing is on another topic, but similar, about putting my own business, not even, regardless of me communicating to other women or otherwise, but just putting my life business out on these streets. In my spiritual path, there is a certain, it's not necessarily an obligation, but there's a certain responsibility of doing that, and there are a couple of reasons for that. One, one is a matter of being honest, and for people who believe in a higher authority, and in judgment, reconciliation, redemption, in Hebrew it's called teshuvah, but reconciliation with the universe and with authority and conditions. There's recognition that authority is aware, and I can say God. When I reference God, I say Elohim. So there's recognition that Elohim is already aware of everything that I do. So there's no hiding it. That's an illusion, and secrecy itself is an illusion. So that's like dealing with the heavenly. But when we're dealing with the earthly and the conventionally, like there are these perceptions and even purposefulness of secrets. So why do I abstain from abiding by it in the same way that other people do? That brings another reason, which is when we go through experiences, when we learn better from these experiences, when we're provided with teachings about these experiences, then there is a responsibility of sharing these experiences for those who are going through it now, for those who have the propensity of going through it, or not the propensity, but the potentiality of going through it later. So we say, this is what I've gone through. So when cats are thinking about inappropriate relations, when cats are thinking about inappropriate transgressions towards others, in unscrupulous activities, and additionally, in whatever experience I have in that respect, where I've done that myself, or I've been observant or privy to others doing that, then I share that, like, yo, you already know this is what the rules are, this is what should be done. I can tell you what that is, but then I can also tell you from experience, like what happens afterwards, some of the consequences, some of the lessons that I learned, and that's how I try to share what I share. Is just a matter of like not condemning and saying, oh, it's sin, going to hell, this and the other. I don't. That's not my shtick. I just say, oh, you could do whatever you do, but just recognize there's consequences for everything, regardless of who you are or what you do. Is it? Regardless of what you do? Kind of, sort of, but that's another joint. But there are consequences, and perhaps you have yet to calculate all the consequences that are most likely in either most likely or inevitable to be experienced. And so I try to share that experience, and not just like what the consequences are, but what the experience of those consequences are. Because like cats are like, oh yeah, I don't care about that. I'll try my luck. No, you're not thinking about everything. Well, again, second person, I'm doing that frequently today. That's different from a regular discipline, but I share the consequences and the experience, the hurt, and that's what it is. It's the pain, one's own pain, but the pain that others experience. Because when one begins to mature and wake up in this life, one begins to recognize how much the pain that one has caused others causes oneself before one leaves this life, one way or another, when one wakes up. So I try to convey that, because that's one of the worst experiences I have in this life is betrayal. I would much rather be betrayed than be the betrayer, and I lead my life in that way as best I can. So why I play myself, why I put my business out on the street, that's much of it. But I'll just like kind of somewhat go back to the notion of like it's not a matter of ego or conquest. It's not a matter of like the whole. I've said this before about like trying to get numbers or whatever else. There's a purposefulness in it, and it's a purposefulness that exists beyond my interests, beyond my wants, beyond my comfort zone, and so there's a spiritual guidance that leads me to do. And again, I ain't perfect. I do everything the best as I can, but it is very different from what other people do, and it may be judged by the expectations of what other people do. And when that's the case, I simply kindly advise cats to consider all the factors in the equation to just make an accurate assessment accordingly. I've lived for over 20 years with cats calling me crazy and everything else like that. That don't faze me none too much. But I am my interest is in cats for their own sake being accurate, and call me out. And if cats have disagreement with whatever else, I mean, most people just don't pay it, like just turn away and ignore whatever else. Who's this do whatever. But for those who take issue or concerns or like whatever, let's chop it up and talk about it. So. I'm gonna continue on to like a further joint about this, about just like social media in general, and okay, we're going. I said this is gonna have some nitty gritty on here, so here we're getting into some nitty gritty now. So. Dudes ain't the only ones putting ourselves out here, and I don't even know how many dudes are doing something similar to what I'm doing, so I ain't going to speak in that kind of categorical sense, but I just put it like this. Even just looking on YouTubers, and particularly young sisters, or sisters in general, there are a lot of sisters who put the sister selves out there, and by that I mean like showing a lot about the life, friends, family, and additionally, and not giving details of here and there, but even just sharing ideas and life experience, that's putting a lot of oneself out there. And it may be, to be honest, I can't compare it. I can't say definitively about like the stage of life in which one does that. Because I had say from experiencing the internet at a young age, and feeling the effects of social media at a young age. I know at an older age, I feel the effects of my involvement on the internet. How after doing things like this, like I get like a gravitational pull back to the internet to watch things that I have like very little interest in, and get fatigued in watching it. And I don't mean that derogatory about the internet or what I see, but like I just recognize like the hold it has. But that's not what we're talking about necessarily in terms of influence, because putting oneself out there, because when one shows one's family, when one shows like one's lifestyle, when one shows one's feelings, tells one's stories and everything else like that, people know your business. And I know what that's like in life. When anybody knows your business, then cats can clown, cats can utilize that information, again, manipulate, try to go to a social function or a party, whatever, and try to like start to like talk with people. Then people can use that information to belittle and devalue and whatever else. And so to share that information about oneself makes one very vulnerable. And there are a lot of people, and particularly a lot of sisters, who are putting information about themselves out onto the streets of the interweb. And it's actually, to be honest, it's a generous thing to share that, and a lot of people just feel that naturally. People feel like a sense of security and maybe a certain amount of innocence, like this is my life, I want to share it with people, and people want to love everybody around the earth, and that's a beautiful thing. But at the same time, it's a very precarious thing, and so we have to be mindful of that. And the thing is, we do know that, and that's why there are things like the block on IG. And all these passive-aggressive ways of avoiding each other and shutting each other down, which are actually unhealthy. I remember, like, the first experience I got being blocked on IG, it felt like my car got stolen. It was that feeling, because, now, to be honest, I've never had a stolen car. I've had my car towed before, particularly for being parked in different places or whatever else. But I've had my car towed before, and I know what that feels like, because at first I thought it was stolen. But it's just like, I left my car here. I know I did. I did not park anywhere else. I left my car here. I know I did. Somebody took my car. It was here. I know it was. Or if somebody or anything gets stolen, and you know that you put it there, you like if it was a wallet or if it was money or a computer. I've had my computer stolen twice in the past, and so I know what that is. I left my computer. I know I did. I'm not even. There's no question about it. It was here, and now it's gone. I know somebody took it. Everything else is perfectly the same. Nothing else has changed. It's just that one particular item is gone, and so it's like that violation of like everything is the same, but like it's gone, and it's like there's no note of saying like, I took this. It's just like it's gone. So that's what it's like being blocked. Like on IG, it's just like, yo, I know this person was on IG. What? What happened? Like, what? So now it's legit, like, because people are putting, particularly women, and it's not an onus on women, but it's the onus on conditions. I'll put information on the internet, and there are a lot of dudes who are unsafe in this joint, and so it's very understandable. We've got to have these protocols to be able to make people feel comfortable. But the thing is this. If there's that type of certainty, first of all, it's not healthy to be passive aggressive and just to avoid people. That's not healthy. It's rife. It is rife within Western civilization, particularly in the United States. Rife within society. There's so much of that, and people. We have all different types of names for that. But it's not healthy. It's just like it adds just like to the anxiety and everything else like that. And because then like, in that avoidance, it just has to be built up. Like then we have to it's like we never talk to that person again. And if that's going to be the case, like there's so much of life that is adjusted just to abide by that one statement. And people try to be entrenched in that. And so it's all unhealthy, and it's extended through social media, and it's still unhealthy. It's unhealthy way of having a relationship. It's beneficial to be honest, direct. And I know that a lot of cultures ain't necessarily like that, but finding a way to do that, because the passive aggressiveness just leads to other things. Like that angst it bubbles within, and then we have diseases like heart disease. It gets manifested through other things: drugs, alcohol, overeating, and that's me done gained probably like 20 pounds actually, or probably 20 too many pounds. All these other things that actually deteriorate our bodies. Wow. Health. Let's get to health. Let's heal. Let's heal our bodies and get well. So, but we still get into the nitty gritty. So, anyways, it's not healthy these method things. And that was just a side note about IG and the blocking. Is that venting? Am I being biased? How can I not be? So again, dudes do things that are out there, but sisters are putting a lot of stuff on the internet and putting sister selves out there, and it's beneficial for us to find a way of sharing with the world, but sharing it in a way that's safe and secure and healthy, but also recognizing that particularly when sisters put information in here, and that's one thing I was going to get to as well. Putting information, dudes respond to that. Dudes have an interest. When a woman puts information about herself on there, she's advertising. And people say, no, you can't construe that, this and the other. She is announcing herself. And cultures do this for thousands of years. There's so many traditional rituals of announcing the adulthood of a man, announcing the adulthood of a woman. And that the implications of that. She's available for mating. He's available for mating. And then there's the valuation accordingly. That's what's being done on the social media and on the internet. It's basically just like it's a dating app. It's a dating app. And that again might be perceived as a cynical kind of overgeneralization, but that's a lot of it. It's just a lot of evaluation. But here's the thing about it, and that segues into this section. How young sisters are being groomed to be sex queens. And this is the nitty-gritty. What I mean by that. First of all, it comes with birth control. What does birth control means? Right? Birth control means being able to have sexual intercourse, particularly outside of the sanctity and the commitment of marriage, and not have children, not experience the lingering consequences and responsibilities and the drag of that sexual intercourse. So it's basically having pleasure without the perceivable pain. and it's a huge crass way of looking at it, but that's basically the mentality. And I don't mean to be derogatory towards brethren who do that, but who have that mentality or whatever else. But that's basically the mentality of having sexual intercourse without having a child. Now, there's also notions of protecting from sexual disease additionally, but a lot of the birth control is for that purpose. So what happens is that there's a teaching intrinsically for teenagers to have sex. And that may seem like the conservative political party trope of anti this, that, and the other, but it is a sanctioning of not necessarily immediately promiscuity, but sexual relations before marriage. And so you don't have to advertise that for dudes, because dudes are already. I have to be mindful of my words. I'm trying to be respectful and clean, but at the same time, I'm trying to speak my language, and which is kind of plain spoken and involves like language from the streets. But dudes are already on that. So the effect is particularly towards young women, young sisters, and even when many young sisters abstain from being influenced or convinced by that messaging, and that's not to say that birth control is intended to discourage youth into sexual intercourse, but effectively it communicates it. And I speak from personal experience, and not just of myself personally, but of many brethren as well. So sex queens, what does that mean? Even when young sisters aren't convinced about having sex before marriage as teenagers, there becomes a norm of competing for attention, competing for favor, affection, and additionally from other boys. And the boys tend to just, because boys are selfish and greedy and immature often, not all, but often, and so tend to be less discriminating when it comes to the young sisters, or just sisters in general, who put out, for lack of a better word, and without intention of undue disrespect. But that's the nature. So to have some type of competing whatever in the game, there's there's that social pressure and peer pressure to eventually give in to the selfishness, the indiscretions of sex before marriage. I'm hearing myself, and I'm sounding like one of the prudish people that are called prudes, that say that spiel when I'm young. But there's not just truth, but there's necessary truth in that. So that it begins that kind of culture and that kind of norm and that kind of expectation, and then the measuring bar is established in that respect as well. So what happens within this scenario is that now women are provided with very convenient way of having that sexual intercourse by receiving the birth control, and it's with or without the parents' involvement or knowledge, which is right there troubling, very troubling, and much of the messaging that is provided, very much indirectly, tacitly often, is that the women get favor for having sex and rewarded. And that doesn't mean like payment or whatever, but just attention and compliments, even perhaps acceptance, not just from the dudes, but even from like teachers and additionally. And it's not all just a matter of like a woman beginning to have sex with a lot of dudes, or even just select dudes or whatever. It's a matter of, it's a spectrum of different types of sexual activity. And the game kind of unfolds from there, because acceptance into or Academic performance is influenced by this. Favor from professors, favor from teachers. Not necessarily that the teachers or professors are having sex with the person, but teachers and professors can be manipulative, and this might be a very serious call out or whatever else, but teachers and professors can be manipulative in terms of perceiving certain women as favorable candidates for increasingly elite circles in the progression of the young sister's career, going to a university, becoming involved in certain societies where she might find favor with the men in those groups, and so if she's groomed towards that experience, then that provides favor for the teachers and the professors, because then those universities, those societies say, oh, that professor has introduced us to a number of women who have done very favorably with our group. So then that professor is rewarded accordingly. And again, there's no money necessarily exchanged in this process, but there is favor and communication, relationship, and again, access within these elite circles and spheres. And so again, the woman doesn't even necessarily have to have sex with anyone in that scenario, but her willingness, it gets increasingly detailed and specific, but that's somewhat of a general outline or description. That's one scenario, and that's a comparatively elitist scenario, where the actual acts of sexual intercourse tend to be fewer or increasingly selective. So, but then there's a spectrum throughout of where the sexual intercourse is increasingly frequent, and the number of people involved is increasingly larger. So there's a whole spectrum of those types of scenarios, those types of teachers, those professors, those students, and additionally. And the point is that many sisters are groomed to progress within that scenario. That's a huge kind of accusation, and additionally, it's an observation and an obligation of truth. So, and with the intention of healing, addressing it, healing, and being increasingly well collectively. So, on the other end of that spectrum of the elite, there's also what is considered the further crass or whatever else, and we can talk about pornography in that respect, and other forms of sexual exploitation that are very blatant and easier to acknowledge as sexual exploitation, even when women are willing and smiling and everything else. That's just another part of the spectrum of the grooming. So the valuation and the judgment and everything else like that. So I mentioned before, this is not excusing anything men do and all the BS that men do, but it's recognizing that there's a balance in this, and that there are harmful things that women do too, and that women are discouraged into doing. And so in the interest of genuine and collective well-being, there's a necessity of addressing the aggregate of these conditions. So one other thing I'll say is that I see recently some videos on YouTube, again, because it gets into the vortex, about stalkers. And it's some scary stuff this was door cams, and this might seem like just some random whatever, but there's a reason why I share this. So it was sharing some footage of door cams of dudes who do stalking, and there were some disturbing things of people visiting doorsteps, but then there was also the less aggressive, but still not even, it's beyond cringe. It was it's beyond creepy. It was concerning. But one example was a vehicle that would drive by a house, like day after day, a stranger who had a chance interaction, and additionally, and just kept on like stalking the house. So, um, again, men are doing like stupid stuff, and that needs to be addressed and minimized as much as possible. And on the flip side, I will share this. When we look at what women put onto the social media, not even just the pornography, I think that's just too obvious. A lot of people vehemently argue for pornography, but I think the vast majority of society recognizes that it is very harmful. I think the vast majority has yet to recognize how harmful it actually is, particularly amongst young brothers, and I'm talking about like nephews, elementary school, middle school level, even before high school. How harmful that is. Society has yet to recognize that collectively. But speaking about what women do that is accepted in social media as not pornography, seemingly, which is thirst trapping. It may be considered that thirst trapping is the female equivalent of male stalking. And that might seem like a serious accusation, because we know where male stalking can lead. I won't necessarily say often, because I think probably dudes stalk women very further frequently than is actually reported and talked about. And so how often that actually translates to an actual encounter of violence is probably, the percentage is comparatively low, most likely. I'm uncertain. But I do know it's serious. So I do recognize that. And I still say that the female equivalent is thirst trapping, because there is significant harm that is caused from that. And it's sexual exploitation. So whether the women intended or not, whether women are aware of it or not, there's a harm that's caused towards men in the sexual in the thirst trapping, and there's very obvious, like the blatant types of thirst trapping, but then there's like the slow and the subtle kind of thirst trapping. So there's a narrow spectrum, or there's a modest spectrum of like the different types of thirst trapping amidst the aggregate spectrum of sexual exploitation. But it's appropriate to recognize the harm that's caused from that, and how that influences culture and norms and expectations on both sides. Because then dudes are thinking that women are just about that, and then women think, oh, dudes are just about that. So it's beneficial to be mindful of this. All right, we're about. I think we're over an hour. How am I still on IG then? It should be shutting off very soon. I still have some light, so I'll see if I can try to finish this. I think I'm going to get the countdown. Oh, no, I still got about like 6 minutes. All right. So maybe about 15 minutes of light. And I'm not sure how much patience I have from the kinfolk around me. But we're stretching it one way or the other. Hi. How you doing?
Good.
All right.
Good.
Nice to see you again. All right. So my purpose for sharing this is for healing. To see it, it's difficult to categorically avoid it in many ways, but at the same time, we can avoid doing it now. And a lot of my purpose for sharing this is to enhance our communication, because we are communicating a lot, just in even just in like the photographs or whatever else, and what we are communicating may not necessarily be what we are intending to communicate, and in that process there is miscommunication and misunderstanding, and then from that there is uh, it compounds itself. It multiplies, and then it becomes resentment, and then accusations, and additionally. So the consideration is to be mindful of these aren't even necessarily the root causes, but some of the preceding factors and causal factors, and increasingly address these and heal these, so that the communication, even just again the expectations, what the norms are, and additionally that has a significant influence in how even just a man and a woman communicate. And when the conditions are unhealthy, then it's difficult to like build healthy communication, even just on a one-on-one basis, because we still have to deal with the potentialities within the situation. Lighting is adjusted now. I guess night lights are turned on. They turned the lamp on. All right. So, excuse me. That's some of the purposefulness in sharing this as well. So it's not just a matter of them young people, whippersnappers, da 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 da. It's a matter of like, yo, let's heal so that we can be, yeah. That's the idea. So with that, we're continuing on. I think that we're getting through some of that nitty gritty. I don't necessarily know if it's, or I don't know if it's necessarily like satisfactory. Hi. I don't know if that like is. There's any sense of resolution in that, or like whether there's necessity of processing further, but there's that. I'm looking at my own notes to see if there's anything else that's difficult from this part. So I think that's much of the difficulty. Well, I'll say this: some of the harms from like the thirst trapping, because dudes are malleable. Dudes are like little dogs, including myself. Or I'm not even going to further go on that joint, but very malleable to the suggestions that women provide, and thus many dudes' responses to the energized experience that dudes have in seeing women can be manipulated and are manipulated into dudes doing bad things. And those bad things can take on a spectrum of things towards others, but also to the dude's own selves. Again, those have multiplier effects as well. So it may seem just like some kind of like tertiary type of disturbance or an annoyance or whatever else, but it's actually fundamental in the experience of human relationship. And yes, I'm still not human. But I have relationship with humans. So there's that. And all right. Ha ha ha. It is going to close off in about a couple minutes though, so let's see if I can do this one. Telepathy. I referenced this in the joint before. So the consideration is telepathy exists. It's a thing. Now, the nature, like I say before, with all things, is just to know what the nature of it is. How does it exist and whatever. And it's a very precarious thing to kind of define categorically, or to say, oh, this is this person, that person, because the nature of telepathy is very the notion of evidence is very less applicable or available in the experience. In the experience of telepathy. So it's appropriate to be mindful of that. Now, that being said, one of the ways of recognizing a type of telepathy is tacit communication. And we can tacit communication, meaning like communication between two people or a group of people that's done without speaking words. Like if somebody just makes an inside joke and everybody gets the joke, that's tacit communication. It's referencing a shared experience that everybody knows without it being actually referenced. And that is an extremely valuable, extremely deep type of communication and relationship that people share with each other. Cultures and communities share with each other. This thing is about to cut off, so I'm going to pause for a moment and and then reload. So cheers for those who are on here at the moment. I appreciate people like commenting on like how to make this better, how to share this, and what I could address, how I can deliver this in a way that's increasingly effective. But I plan to like reload after this hangs up. So peace and blessings to the brethren, to our kinfolk out here. I'm waiting for this to shut off. Hey da 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 da. Hey da 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 da. Hey da 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 da. Heedy heedy hi. I keep going to the computer. Dee dee da dee da. Dee dee da dee da. That's not what I want. Where is it? Oh, it's back up there. That's what I want. And then this joint here, and then this joint here, and then this joint here. So we're back at this. So I was talking about communication between men and women, or it's communication in general, telepathy, as well as tacit communication. And I gave a definition of what tacit communication is, and a hypothetical or example of that as well. So the notion of telepathy is that it is a thing. The consideration is to understand the nature of that thing. Tacit communication is one form of telepathic communication, essentially, that is further evidentiable amongst kinfolk of Earth. So that being said, one thing we can further recognize is that there are many ways in which men and women speak with each other without speaking with each other. In that respect, in that experience, particularly in that, if we go back to utilizing the term telepathic, even just signals or whatever else, often tacit, but we'll just say telepathic. In that experience, there are countless ways that women have an advantage, and then there are also certain ways that men have advantage, and vice versa. And without getting into all the details of that, what I emphasize is mindfulness. I'll put the notes closer to myself so I stay from the computer. A mindfulness, so that whatever communication is shared is increasingly genuine and healthy, and mutually, collectively, omnipresently. So that begins within ourselves. And what up, brother? So tacit communication, telepathic communication, man and woman. Again, beneficial to be genuine, mindful, and purposeful, even within our own thoughts, within our intentionality, and within our own routines of day to day in our disciplines. And from that mindfulness, being increasingly effective in the communication we project from ourselves. telepathic and otherwise. It's not perfection. It's not perfection either. There's always inaccuracies in interpretation and additionally, but when we dutifully cultivate that honesty and compassion and modesty within ourselves, then that honesty, compassion, and modesty is increasingly experienced within the forms of communication, interaction, and relationship that we cultivate with others. Directly, indirectly, tacitly, and as well as even telepathically. So, that being said, I will also say this. In the relationship between men and women, there is the actuality that women need men and men need women. A woman needs a man and a man needs a woman. And I recognize some may disagree with that. That's beautiful and we can talk about it. Meanwhile, a woman needs to be touched, held, hugged, loved, caressed, to experience a certain strength. That may be considered as the maintenance of her house. A man needs a woman, though a man has less of that need of the touch and holding the crest. Dudes abstain from having that same requirement. However, dudes need to be nurtured, to be cared for. To be attended to, cared to. That might seem like a pejorative subjugating, condescending, patronizing, patriarchal kind of like interpretation. Dudes need that. It's not a matter of do this, you got to do this. No. Dudes need that. And women need what I mentioned women need. So in maintaining his house, he requires a woman. And a woman maintaining her house, she needs a man. Now, we can find exceptions or avoidances. That may be somewhat of a pejorative inaccuracy. The breath is showing. However, for example, monasticism. A monk can cultivate a mindfulness wherein that experience is quelled. There are also occasions when a woman can be self-serving or a man can be self-serving. Yet, it may be considered as somewhat of a insufficient substitution for the actual need that is experienced. But the basic point is that a woman has a need for the maintaining of her house that a man provides, and a man has a need for the maintaining of his house that a woman provides. And the point of that is not to consider how that can be utilized to manipulate, to gain advantage, or to get control or ownership of one over the other. It's simply a matter of one recognizing that within oneself, and then one observing that within, or acknowledging that within others, particularly when the interest and endeavor is marriage between a man and a woman. And so in that process, the Buddha talks about that's the quintessential time, or the quintessential stage of life or occasion in life where people are valued. And so in that process, again, being mindful, purposeful, genuine, honest, compassionate, and modest in approaching, again, the communication and the relationship, right? So that there is optimal mutual agreement, optimal mutual comfort, and well-being. And I'm going to go back to what I was talking about before about a woman's needs and a man's needs. A woman has a need of security, comfort, well-being, and attention, affection, and dudes have less of a necessity for that. Dudes have a necessity for being listened to, somebody providing attention, and validation and affirmation, and gentle reminders without bruising the ego. And additionally, again, and so that's less of the need for women. And there is the case within Western civilization. No, it's not even just Western civilization. There's the case within the world of civilization in general, where one of those needs is articulated as like a responsibility given or whatever, and then another one of those needs is communicated as a weakness, a deficiency, a sign of inferiority. All right, and so then the subjugation, the patriarchy, or not even the patriarchy, but because patriarchy is not a bad thing, matriarchy is not a bad thing. It's the chauvinism, it's the selfishness, it's the greed, hatred, and delusion. Those are the bad things, whether it's done by men or women. It just so happens that it's often done institutionally and organizationally by men historically. So that the word patriarchy is often attributed to that tendency, but patriarchy in and of itself is not a bad thing, and matriarchy in and of itself is not a bad thing either. I already said that, but matriarchy, I'll say this because it's appropriate to do so. Matriarchy is legit, just like patriarchy is legit. How about that? We speak in the positive, affirmational. And when we look at this is all a side note, but even looking at like the Gayana Shigowa of the Haudenosaunee, and I say this often because I study this often, it establishes a patriarchy it establishes a matriarchal rule where the matriarchs of the clans decide who the chiefs are of the tribes, who sit in the council and make the decisions. So it is the men who make the decisions. It is the men who go to war. The war chiefs are men, but it's the women who decide. It's the women, the matriarchs, who decide who those men are. So there's that balance and that wisdom, that natures being shared together, that lead the entire tribe, the entire federation. So it's appropriate to recognize that. And so when the U.S. Constitution draws itself from that precedent of the law of the Great Peace, Gayana Shigowa, the United States Constitution does not include that element within it, and that's a very, I don't want to say a tragic flaw, but it's a very significant absence And it's worse than absence. It's a detriment, because we see the consequences accordingly. And so all the things that are done afterwards to account for that absence and those deficiencies, that's another word to describe it, are bandages on the cracks. So and it's not just, those aren't just cracks in like the wall or whatever, they're cracks in the foundation. So anyways, that is that joint. So again, go back to the original statement of man needing a woman and a woman needing a man. And in recognizing that, not utilizing those needs in a manipulative, predatory way, but acknowledging those needs in a complementary way, with respect and with genuineness. Honestly, the winds are picking up. With genuineness, compassion, and modesty, and in the approach and the prospect of partnership, so, and particularly marriage. So that's another consideration within this as well, commitment. And within this there's balance, and within this there is new life. There is that sharing of nurturing and that sharing of strength together in the completion of the house. So there's that. Now we are continuing to the conclusion I think we're at. And now it's dark out here, so I have to like look to the notes. One thing I didn't mention specifically about what a man needs, I said nurturing, but that includes like, well, I won't get into details. I'll leave that as it is. Oh yeah, okay. Oy. A further consideration within this is that when a man straightens his mind and his thoughts about women in general, and cleans his mind about the thoughts he has of women, he straightens his mind. There's a reason why I say that particular word. When the thoughts of a man towards a woman straighten, I have a specific way of saying this. All right, I'll go back to my notes. When a man straightens his thoughts about the women around him, the universe around him straightens. So we can say when he cleans his thoughts, when he makes his thoughts increasingly righteous, when he is increasingly honest and compassionate and modest in his thoughts of the women around him, the universe around him is increasingly honest, compassionate, and modest. Because here's the consideration again, considering this telepathy, considering the influence, considering the further effects that these thoughts and influences have on behavior, the actions, and further, and how that influences conditions, well-being, and additionally, just the way a man thinks about the women around him. If he's entertaining lustful thoughts and derogatory thoughts, and additionally of the women around him, there's anxiety. It's manifesting anxiety within himself, but also within the women around him and with the men around him as well. And it's imposing expectations. It's imposing visualizations. People talk about vision boards and this and the other. It's imposing these cognitive conditions, even just in a conceptual sphere, concerning each woman that he has those thoughts about. And in that, the woman is devalued, is pigeonholed into like just a certain way of being thought of, and it becomes increasingly evident what his thoughts are by his mannerisms. Even though, and I'm speaking from personal experience. After I do that myself, I become aware of like even how small things, like not just like glances or whatever, but certain indicators reveal to a woman what a man is thinking about her. And that influences how she thinks about herself. And then that influences how other men think about her too. Then that influences further how she thinks about herself, and then how she presents herself. And I'm not saying like it's all about mind control and how and a woman being all poor and susceptible, but there is influence. And when it's rife, it becomes increasingly acute. So it's serious. It's a thing, and it's legit. So when those thoughts are greedy and selfish and delusional and even hateful, there are effects of that. And it affects not just the woman, it affects not just the man, but everybody else around the man and around the woman as well. And then the conditions are accordingly. And thus, we do the flip side when he straightens his thoughts, when he becomes increasingly compassionate and honest and modest about the way he thinks about women. The women experience that too, and say, oh, wait a minute, he didn't like flinch like all the other men do, or he didn't look when all the other men looked. So he must not be thinking about that in that way. Now she might say, oh, why doesn't he think about that? And she might make conclusions about that, or she might think further or whatever else. But eventually, like, she might be increasingly receptive to what he is thinking about, because he's thinking about her in an increasingly positive way that's congenial and conducive to her well-being and enduring well-being. And so it's beneficial for her to say, okay, what is he thinking about? And it might not necessarily even be about her per se, because, well, that's somewhat of a side note, or a tangent. But it might be like something purposeful, like a school or like a project or whatever else. And so instead of just like dwelling, because dudes can just dwell on just lustful, selfish thoughts and on and on and on and on without thinking like of being detected or whatever else. But when a dude isn't thinking about that, just like lounging back and doing that, got things to do purposeful. And so women becoming Christian, well, what is that? He's not like on that. So he's not, well, all right. My point is that when it's increasingly honest, compassionate, and modest, it has the same effect, or it has the same propensity of influence, but in a positive way. And so there's a positive influence on the woman that's increasingly healthy and promotes well-being, and then that also has a rippling effect, a multiplying effect on the men and women around her, the men and women around the man, and society. So the community and society. So that's what I mean by when a man straightens his thoughts about the women around him, the universe around him straightens, becomes increasingly compassionate, honest, compassionate, and modest. So it's not something that's overnight. It's not even something that's like, okay, I'm doing this now it should be like this. The universe don't work in man's quid pro quo expectations or whatever else. But it that is the nature of it, and it does manifest. So, and it's not a matter of an individual's will or a man's will being manifested. It's a matter of attunement, harmonizing with the conditions of the universe, and finding a methodology of well-being and sustenance accordingly. So that's a positive note. Is it the concluding note? Haha, I gotta talk about my U.S. passport. So I think that's pretty much the joint. So I began this whole spiel about on the topic of corruption and commitment, how life goes in these two directions, how when we commit ourselves to a purpose greater than ourselves, we experience support and an increased propensity for enduring well-being. When in the absence of such commitment, there is progression into corruption. So there's benefit in being mindful of committing ourselves in a dutiful way and optimizing our experience of well-being and the well-being of the life around us. So with that being said, I have to get into like a housekeeping note about my U.S. passport, because I've made some statements about this recently, and now the pen dropped and there are leaves on the ground, so it's difficult to see it. I'll provide some additional comments about the U.S. passport situation. So to sum this up, for many years I live on this land and continent and community without being a U.S. citizen, and I continue in such a manner. For that period, I'm without a U.S. passport or any government ID. I'm without a bank account. I abstain from utilizing any social security number or anything else like that. So I essentially live off the grid, and that's for the past 10 years. When I make an endeavor to leave this country to go to my ancestral homeland of Denmark, could it be? Yes. I'm refused because I'm without those credentials. So after consultation with the Earth, I'm advised to reconcile with the United States to facilitate my travel outside of the United States, and then to continue with whatever I consider to be appropriate in accordance with wherever I am at that moment and the protocols in that particular location. So that is what I'm doing. I actually now at this point I have a state ID. There is an application for myself having a U.S. passport, utilizing the U.S. Identifiers or credentials that are forwarded to me during the beginning stages of my life: birth certificate, social security number, and additionally. And so, yeah, that's not a point because I already addressed all this before. So, anyways, all that being said, the passport application is being processed. So for those who have a concern about the authenticity, staying true to the game, I should also say I have a world passport. I refer to myself as a world citizen. That is legit. But I can be accused of being a hypocrite for signing and taking an oath, promising, raising my hand and verbally affirming that the statements on that paper are true. I explained before that in signing the paper, I included the 3/5 compromise, or the 3/5 E, which signifies that the document is being completed under duress and coercion. And so I can take the vow to say that the information on the application is accurate because the 3/5 E communicates that the information is provided under duress. Now, I don't mean to be deceitful or anything, but this is being honest, and the honesty is that there is an absence of an internationally conventionally acceptable methodology of leaving this continent without such credentials. That's coercion and duress. And I've already consulted with the Earth on getting out, and the Earth has essentially not refused but directed me towards this option. So because of that, like I said, I've already explained all this anyways before, so it's perfect for me to get to the next, what I have to say at the moment, because I've got other things to do today as well. And I don't mean to sound rude, because nobody's demanding me one or the other, but it's appropriate for me to just continue on without giving all the information up to this point. So from this point, what is appropriate for me to provide is that there's congruency within what I say. It's not necessarily the cleanest, but it is honest, it is compassionate, and it is modest. It is genuine. One thing I'll say is that it's not even between me and the United States at this point. It's not even between me and anybody. But if anything, it's with me and the earth at this point. It's me and the earth that are negotiating at this point. So it's not even about the United States. And I don't mean to be like dismissive or condescending towards the United States, but it's me and the earth at this point. So that's the stage of negotiation. And the interesting thing about it is this: like me dealing with the earth, like the earth in many ways is much further agreeable, and like honest, but at the same time demanding, and doesn't take bullshit. And it's the turnaround is somewhat quicker. So in dealing with things in the United States, everybody knows everything's BS. So it's a game, and nobody takes it seriously. It's just a matter of what cats can get away with, and always trying to test each other. And so there's like, oh, I just playing. Oh, okay. And then like it's all a part of the negotiation. The earth don't play that game. Essentially, the earth don't play that. So it's to recognize that. The other thing is that the turnaround, like in the United States, there's like this experience of like, oh, they're not going to get it. They're not going to get me. Or, I won't have to do that for a while. Because it's that isolationism that the United States experiences about being so distant from the rest of the earth. But again, the earth don't play that. Like, if it's not done by this point, the grace period is like, it's not like it is with the United States. So I have to be mindful of that. But like I said, this is with me and the earth at this point. And the negotiation continues. And it's me and the earth are not contentious. I'm not even at the United States. The United States historically is at me. And then I defend myself. Literally and repeatedly. But I don't hate the United States. Love and peace to everybody in the United States, including all the brethren that I know and the dear loved ones that I have. So I ain't at anybody because I'm not predatory. Anyways, all right. So I'm supposed to say oh, so about the passport. Should I be issued a passport? Because it's not a guarantee. Should I be issued a passport? These are the scenarios that we are looking at, and I can say all of it is by the will of God, inshallah, bis Hashem Jai Om. These are scenarios that we're looking at. The scenario is whether I get a passport or I don't get a passport. So that's the first branch right there. So we'll deal with the first scenario of getting a passport. At that point, and me still having the means to get to get a plane ticket to go to Denmark, then I do that. Then the next consideration is whether Denmark allows me into Denmark, or whether I get detained, deported, or what. That's another step. But in the scenario, the next branch of scenarios of being accepted and admitted into Denmark and starting to like have access to mobility and to be there for a certain period of time. One of the first things my intention is to do is to go to the U.S. Embassy and turn in the passport. In a legal, legit way, but then officially renounce U.S. citizenship. Now the thing is, I already do that. I've already renounced my citizenship over a decade ago, and I did it legitly. I sent official correspondence to a legit United States agency, federal agency, communicating renunciation of my citizenship. The thing about it, though, is that that's not what the United States accepts as the formal process of renouncing one's citizenship. And my intention was not to duck what the formal thing is, but just to recognize, I'm indifferent to what the United States wants. I've communicated the information, and now it's just up to me not to utilize anything that the United States provides in that respect to U.S. citizens accordingly. And so that's what I do for the past decade. I don't have a bank account. I don't have a state ID. I don't fill out a W-2 form. I don't have a tax form. I don't have a U.S. passport. And I don't use a social security number. I always have my birth certificate because that's beyond state sovereignty. But even I haven't utilized it or whatever. So all those things that all those gifts or tokens or privileges of citizenship. I abstain from utilizing, and so that's been the past 10 years. So when I go to the Earth is like, basically, if you're going to do it, you got to do it in the way that the United States stipulates, because this is in accordance with the international standards and accordingly. So I recognize that. And the thing about it, though, is it's communicated to me, is that the United States tends to be not accept renunciation of citizenship while the person is on U.S. soil. So it requires getting off the land in order for the United States to accept the form or whatever of renunciation. So now that can be contested, but that's not my point at this moment. It's not to officially renounce the U.S. citizenship. I could do that and put in labor for that at the moment, but like I said, it's an involved process, and that's not my point right now. Point is to move to another continent. So that is what I'm focusing on, and upon arrival, God willing, then going to the embassy, then submitting the passport, going through the formal process that the United States requires, and then continuing on with Denmark and the EU and the world accordingly. So that's that scenario, and that's like the favorable scenario. That's the planned scenario. That's what I'm planning for. It's not a given. There are a lot of ifs in that scenario. So. So we can look at some of those other possibilities. Well, the possibilities of getting about getting the U.S. passport, and then what happens to me afterwards, like being accepted into another nation or whatever. I'm less concerned about that, because wherever I'm at, I've done what I'm supposed to be doing, which is to leave the continent and go to another country, and specifically Denmark. But if Denmark has problems with me, wants to detain me, whatever else, I deal with that accordingly. Deportation, that becomes like at that point, it's Denmark's decision of where Denmark wants to send me, what other nation may want to accept me, or otherwise. So, like I said, that's something to deal with at that point in that scenario. Now, the big branch is, again, if the United States refuses the passport. So in that scenario, the intention, there are actually a number of different options. One, there's going to China and saying, "Yo, China, guess what? I need asylum." And seeing how receptive and supportive China is in facilitating that. There's going to Canada, which is the most likely option in that scenario. And the reason why I abstain from doing that as is because there are some uncertainties with that, and that those uncertainties can result in a lot of wow, it's about to be an hour at this point. Some of those uncertainties can result in long, lingering, being in limbo for an uncertain period of time. So at this moment, when there's the option of certain certainties and arriving or with the passport, being able to actually leave and then deal with Denmark in Denmark, that's increasingly favorable than being in limbo in Canada. So, but that's an option amidst being refused a passport. And even further, at that point, then I go back to the Earth and say, "Look, Earth, I went to the United States, they refused me." And then the Earth has to respond to that, because then things done changed at that point. And there should be increasing support and receptivity to my solicitation of facilitation of travel of me to Denmark. I say of me like anyways, but for me traveling to Denmark and or an additional location of this Earth. So, but that's with me having the notice from the United States saying, "No, you can't get no." So those are the basic scenarios that we're looking at. Meanwhile, I'm just planning to establish Culture House in Denmark accordingly, and reaching out to brethren in that respect. So I think that's much of what I had to cover for this joint. Again, way longer than I was supposed to be here at. But it'd be like that sometimes. So that's it. This ain't an official joint or whatever else. This is my personal. Oh no, it's not. Oh man, I gotta get onto my social media game. I'm thinking this whole time this is on my personal account, and now I see that it's on Mixed with Earth. I should have known that at the very beginning. Wait, oh, that must have been the first. Oh, both of these joints have been on Mixed Earth. Oh man, okay. So basically, I gotta delete these joints. Then is what it is. And then I gotta put up a my bad joint, and then adjust it accordingly. Oh, fuck, man. All right. I mean, everything I say is not a secret or whatever, but it's not. It's just not necessarily intended in the Mixed with Earth kind of forum. So, yeah, that's a my bad, because, yo, I have no excuse. Why I play myself, right? I think that's pretty much what I was supposed to share. So, oh man, I should have known when people joined on what it is. But anyways, namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mir, zaijian, adios, te chokris, sempre na asamuje, kele ofren, one love, and peace, happiness, liberation.